Home is supposed to be the one place where we feel completely safe. But when the night grows silent and shadows move, even familiar walls can turn into a nightmare. Tonight, you'll hear 3 disturbing true stories of people who were alone at home, and not truly alone. Story 1, The Man in the Hallway. Jenna lived alone in a small 1-bedroom apartment on the outskirts of town. It wasn't in the best neighborhood, but it was cheap, and after a long search for independence, she finally had a place of her own. At 24, she was proud of being able to manage things on her own, paying bills, decorating her space, and creating what she thought was a safe little sanctuary. But safety, as she would learn, is sometimes an illusion. It was late on a Friday night when it happened. Jenna had fallen asleep on the couch with the TV playing softly in the background. At around 2 a.m., she stirred awake, groggy and disoriented. The room was dark, lit only by the faint bluish glow from the TV screen. At first, she thought it was just the shifting sound of the apartment building settling that woke her, until she heard it. Footsteps. They weren't coming from upstairs or outside. They were inside her apartment. Slow. Heavy. Deliberate. Jenna froze on the couch, her ears straining. She lived alone. There should not have been anyone else there. Her first thought was that maybe she had left the TV louder than she thought and the sounds were coming from whatever show was playing. But when she glanced at the screen, the program was muted on commercials. The sound came again. Step. 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 Her heart pounded so hard she thought whoever, or whatever, was inside would hear it. She sat up slowly, moving as quietly as possible, and reached for her phone on the coffee table. Her trembling fingers clutched it tightly, but she hesitated to dial 911. What if she was overreacting? What if it was nothing? But deep down, Jenna knew. The footsteps were in the hallway. The hallway that led directly to her bedroom. She swallowed hard, forcing herself to stand, and tiptoed to the small crack in her bedroom door. Through the dim sliver of light leaking in from the living room, she saw it, a figure standing at the end of the hallway. Tall. Motionless. Facing directly toward her. Jenna's breath caught in her throat. It wasn't a trick of her tired eyes. She could make out the broad outline of a man. His shoulders, his head slightly tilted. He wasn't moving. He wasn't walking. He was just standing there, watching. She staggered backward, clamping a hand over her mouth to keep from screaming. Her mind raced. Who was he? How did he get inside? She thought she had locked the door. She always locked the door. Minutes felt like hours as she stood frozen in her bedroom, staring at the shadow through the crack. She couldn't hear him breathe, couldn't hear him move. Just silence. Crushing silence. Then, suddenly, the hallway was empty. Jenna slammed the door shut and locked it, her body trembling uncontrollably. She wanted to call the police, but fear convinced her otherwise. What if she was hallucinating? What if they came, searched the apartment, and found nothing? They'd think she was crazy. She decided she'd wait until morning, when daylight would make things feel less terrifying. But she didn't sleep a second that night. Every creak of the apartment, every gust of wind outside the window made her jump. When dawn finally arrived, she mustered the courage to leave her room. She searched every corner of the apartment, every closet, every nook. Nothing. No sign of anyone. Relief started to settle in. Maybe she really had been dreaming after all. Maybe it was just the paranoia of living alone in a creaky old building. That relief evaporated the moment she went to check the front door. The lock was undone. The door was slightly ajar, swaying gently with the morning breeze. Jenna was certain, absolutely certain, that she had locked it the night before. Her stomach dropped. Whoever she saw in the hallway hadn't been a dream. They had been inside. They had been watching her. And at some point during the night, they had left. But the most disturbing thought wasn't that someone had broken in. It was that they hadn't taken anything. No money, no electronics, nothing was missing. All they had wanted was to stand there, watching. And maybe, just maybe, they planned to come back. Story 2, The Attic Scratch. Marcus had never believed in ghosts. He laughed at horror movies, rolled his eyes at friends who claimed their houses were haunted, and considered himself firmly grounded in reality. But all of that confidence started to unravel the moment he moved into his grandmother's old house. The house itself wasn't anything special, an aging two-story place on the edge of town, built sometime in the 1950s. His grandmother had lived there for decades, and after her passing, the property was left to him. He didn't have much money, so instead of selling it, Marcus decided to move in. It was quiet, a little too quiet, but it saved him rent, and at first, that was enough. The first few nights were uneventful. Marcus unpacked, set up his furniture, and tried to make the place feel less like his grandmother's house and more like his own. But no matter how many times he repainted the walls or rearranged the furniture, the place always felt heavy. Like it carried years of secrets in its walls. It was on the 5th night that he heard it. A faint scratching sound coming from above. Marcus was sitting in the living room, scrolling on his phone, when it started. At first, he assumed it was just a raccoon or squirrel in the attic. The house was old, animals finding their way inside wasn't unusual. But then the scratching grew louder. He muted the TV, straining to listen. It wasn't the light scampering of an animal. It was slow. Deliberate. Like fingernails dragging across wood. Marcus laughed nervously to himself. Great. The house is haunted, he muttered. He turned the TV back on, trying to ignore it. But the scratching didn't stop. It went on for nearly half an hour, then suddenly fell silent. The next day, Marcus decided to check. He pulled down the attic ladder and climbed up with a flashlight. Dust swirled in the air as he scanned the space. Old boxes. Furniture covered in yellowing sheets. Nothing unusual. No raccoons. No signs of rodents. He exhaled with relief and went back downstairs. That night, the scratching came again. Louder. Closer. Marcus sat rigid on the couch, flashlight in hand, staring at the ceiling as the sound dragged across the length of the attic. Then, for the first time, he heard something else. A thud. Something heavy had shifted up there. Goosebumps rose across his skin. Animals didn't drag their hands. Animals didn't move furniture. Summoning his courage, he climbed the attic ladder again, flashlight trembling in his grip. He scanned the room. Just like before, dust, boxes, furniture. Nothing out of place. But when he turned to leave, his light fell on something in the corner of the attic floor. Handprints. 2 sets. Fresh in the dust. Fingers splayed wide, pressed deep into the wood as though someone had been crawling on their hands and knees. Marcus's stomach churned. He backed down the ladder, slammed it shut, and locked it in place. He didn't sleep that night. The following day, he tried to rationalize. Maybe he had accidentally made those prints himself when he climbed up. Maybe he didn't remember touching the floor. That had to be it. But when night came, the scratching returned. This time, it was directly above his bedroom. Marcus lay in bed, staring at the ceiling, listening to the sound of fingernails dragging just feet above his head. The scratching stopped suddenly, replaced by something worse. Knocking. 3 slow, heavy knocks. Right above him. Marcus bolted upright, sweat pouring down his face. He grabbed his phone, dialed his friend, and begged him to come over. When his friend arrived, Marcus recounted everything. His friend, skeptical but curious, insisted they check the attic together. Reluctantly, Marcus agreed. They climbed the ladder, flashlights cutting through the darkness. The attic looked the same: dust, boxes, nothing strange. But when Marcus's friend swept his light across the far wall, he froze. There were more handprints. Dozens of them. Some small, some large. As if multiple people had been crawling and dragging themselves through the dust. But there were no footprints. Just hands. His friend paled, muttering that it had to be some sick prank, that maybe squatters had broken in at some point. But the attic had no entry point besides the ladder. No one could have gotten inside without Marcus knowing. That night, Marcus refused to sleep in the bedroom. He stayed in the living room, lights on, clutching a kitchen knife. Around 3 a.m., the scratching began again, but this time, it didn't stay in the attic. It moved down. He heard it in the walls. A slow, dragging sound sliding down toward the living room, as if something was crawling inside the walls themselves, getting closer. The air turned icy cold. Marcus's heart raced as he realized the scratching was now at the base of the wall, just behind the couch where he sat. He jumped up, grabbed his keys, and fled the house without looking back. He spent the night in his car, parked miles away. The next morning, exhausted and shaken, he returned only to pack a few essentials. He never stayed another night. Within weeks, the house was on the market. And though Marcus never set foot inside again, he heard from the next buyer months later. They had moved in, happy to start fresh. But within a week, they complained about a strange sound keeping them awake. Scratching. Always from the attic. Story 3, The Face at the Window. Emma lived in a quiet little one-story house on the edge of town, tucked against a stretch of thick, shadowy woods. To most people, it was the kind of place you dreamed of, peaceful, isolated, surrounded by nature. For Emma, it was a sanctuary after years of noisy apartments and bustling city life. But isolation cuts both ways. The woods were beautiful in the day, with sunlight filtering through the trees and birds filling the air with song. At night, however, the same woods became a wall of blackness. The trees loomed like silent sentinels, the shadows alive with secrets. Emma often reminded herself that she was safe, that no one knew this house as well as she did. But deep down, she sometimes wondered what else might be out there in the dark. One late evening, as autumn winds rattled against the windows, Emma settled into her living room with a cup of tea and a blanket. The TV flickered softly in front of her, offering comfort. She had just started to relax when a feeling came over her, a strange, prickling awareness that she was being watched. Her stomach tightened. She turned her head slowly toward the large front window, the one that faced the woods. That's when she saw it. A face. Pale, expressionless, pressed against the glass. Its dark eyes were locked on her, unblinking, unshaken. Emma screamed, dropping her tea, the mug shattering across the floor. She stumbled back, grabbing the first thing she could find, her phone. With trembling fingers, she dialed 911, whispering frantically into the receiver that someone was outside her house, watching her through the window. But when she looked back, the face was gone. Her heart hammered as she peeked around the corner of the curtain. Nothing. Only her reflection in the glass and the endless black of the woods. The police arrived 15 minutes later. They searched the yard, the woods, the property. No footprints, no sign of anyone. They reassured her it was probably a trick of the light or her imagination, told her to keep her doors locked, and drove off. Emma tried to believe them. She tried to convince herself that she was just overtired, that maybe her mind had played tricks on her. But when she finally gathered the courage to look outside again, her blood ran cold. There were muddy footprints in the grass. Not shoe prints. Bare feet. And they circled the house. That night, Emma shut every curtain, locked every door, and sat awake with every light blazing. She refused to sleep. Her eyes darted from window to window, half expecting that pale face to return. Hours passed. Midnight. Then 1. Then 2. The silence was unbearable, broken only by the occasional creak of the house settling. Emma's eyes grew heavy despite her fear. She was just about to drift off when a soft tapping sound echoed from the bedroom window. Tap. 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 Her eyes flew open. Slowly, she turned her head. The curtains were drawn tight, but she could see the faint outline of a hand pressing against the fabric from the outside. Fingers. Long, pale fingers. Sliding down the glass. Emma's scream caught in her throat. She didn't move. Didn't breathe. The hand remained pressed there for several seconds, then disappeared. By morning, she was a wreck. She barely managed to function, her mind replaying the image of that face, those hands. She decided she couldn't live like this. She was going to install security cameras, alarms, anything to make her feel safe again. That day, she walked the property, inspecting every corner. That's when she noticed something she hadn't before. The muddy footprints didn't just circle her house. They lingered outside her bedroom window. Over and over. As though someone had stood there for hours, watching. The realization made her nauseous. That night, she didn't even try to sleep in her bedroom. She set up camp in the living room with all the curtains drawn, clutching her phone and a flashlight like weapons. Midnight came and went. She thought maybe she would make it through the night without incident. But then, a sound. Not from the window this time. From the back door. The doorknob was turning. Emma's chest tightened, her heart slamming against her ribs. Slowly, cautiously, she crept toward the kitchen, where the back door was. The knob rattled again. Someone was trying to get in. She dialed 911, whispering into the phone, begging them to hurry. Then, silence. The knob stopped turning. She waited, holding her breath, but there was nothing. The police arrived within minutes. Again, they searched the area. Again, they found nothing. No one hiding in the woods. No one lingering nearby. They reassured her, though their eyes betrayed doubt. When Emma checked the next morning, her stomach dropped. This time, the bare footprints weren't just outside. They were inside. Faint, muddy impressions across the kitchen floor, leading toward the hallway, and stopping just outside her bedroom door. Emma never stayed in that house again. She packed a bag, locked the door behind her, and left for good. To this day, she never discovered who, or what, had been watching her. But sometimes, in her dreams, she still sees that pale, unblinking face pressed against the glass. And she always wakes up wondering if it's still out there, waiting. Home should be a place of comfort, safety, and rest. But as these stories remind us, sometimes the real terror waits just beyond a locked door, a dark hallway, or a window at night. Remember, being alone at home doesn't always mean you're truly alone.